نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So tonight's the 11th night of Ramadan and the beginning of the second third of the blessed month. The theme that I'm going to share with you tonight, I'm going to talk about, is a theme that is repeated. It's one of the middle range themes. Show up often enough within the verses of the longer surahs, and sometimes even the shorter surahs as well. And it talks about those who doom themselves. And this is important. I couldn't think of a better wording for this in English, honestly, that would describe what the point I want to make, or the theme in its essence. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often points out, مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيَظْلِمَهُم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never oppress people, force them into deviance, or force them to be deviated, or force them out of the deen, or remove, or that's not, He does not oppress people subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكِنَّ النَّاسَ أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ, as it's repeated in the Quran. People do that to themselves. When you end up in a position, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, where you're going in the wrong direction, in this life or in the hereafter, the understanding, or at least the way that we're supposed to understand it, is that this is something that the person has brought upon himself, as the Hadith Qudsi narrates, فَمَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهَ وَمَنْ وَجَدَ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ فَلَا يَلُومَنَّ إِلَّا نَفْسَهُ. Those who find goodness, may they praise Allah. And those who don't find it, then they have no one to blame but themselves. There's no one else to blame. Which is why, hence the choice of the wording of this theme. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that in many different ways in the Quran, of those who make the choices that end up dooming themselves in terms of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or their outcome, the outcome that they're looking for on the Day of Judgment. This stems, or is rooted for us as Muslims, from the deep understanding that we have of responsibility and accountability in our deen. This piece, I find that we are not doing a very good job in teaching our children that you are very much accountable. You're definitely responsible for the choices that you make. No one else is. Learn to accept that early on in life, so that you're not stuck into your mid-30s or 40s until you fully and most people who embrace it that way, they embrace it because they have no other choice. Because they have no choice, they have to accept the consequences, because the law is seeing them that way. And I know people who are in their 50s and 60s and still can't really take accountability for what they've done. They still don't take responsibility for their choices. They still feel that there's so much that other people had done to them, and that they were inappropriately held accountable for something that they did in their lives. And it's quite fascinating when you run into it, when you see that personality trait come out. When really, as Muslims, this is a big part of our identity, that we don't give the control of our lives to anyone. Like, no one is in charge of me except me. And there's empowerment in that, right? Where you take the reins of your own life. No, you don't let anyone sit there behind the steering wheel. It's all right, you can rest. No. Whoever it is, you remove the moment you have the ability, you sit. Whoever is taking control. I mean, you take on the. You can consult for experience. You can ask for help. You can ask for guidance. But you have to be in control, because you ultimately are responsible and accountable for your choices. That's why the Quran talks a lot about those who doom themselves. It's you. It's always been you. And that piece is something that we have distanced ourselves a little bit from. I think it's the nature of the culture here in Canada specifically, but also in the West, where we sugarcoat things. We don't like telling people, this was you. You did this. We prefer to sandwich approaches everything, and everything has to be kind of watered down, so that you're not really pointing fingers when there's no growth in that. People don't grow that way. I guess in a society that is fully fixated on suing other people, people suing each other in long court hours, I guess that's what you end up with when it's not safe to make any form of mistakes anymore. Then this is what you end up with. But the harm of it, in my opinion, is that the younger generation is going to take longer for them to understand the importance of taking responsibility of their own lives, and understanding that if you're not doing well, it's because you're not doing well. And you have to accept accountability for that. And you can't sit around blaming other forces around you that you can't control to begin with. Everyone has forces in their lives that are pushing them in the right direction and the wrong direction. Who you succumb to is up to you. What you overcome and what you go with and what you flow with is at the end your choice. So we'll go through some of these ayat in surat Yunus, Hud, which is what we're going to be reciting tonight. This is a new cluster of surahs in the Quran. Yunus, Hud, Yusuf, and Ar-Ra'd. They talk about 4 basic elements of Iman, or of faith, in the 4 categories. So in the category of Aqeedah, in the category of suluk, of behavior, in the category of ethics, in the category of morals, it's followed along. Each surah talks about a piece. Surah Yunus talks about Qada and Qadr specifically. Within Aqeedah, that's the most electric piece. It's the piece that if you don't understand properly is going to ruin your faith, and you're not going to be able to survive it. Hud, it talks about the message piece. Reform specifically. Without reform, the message has no backbone. Right? Islam that has no reform in it, that has no islah, that doesn't point out where mistakes are and goes after them to change them, then it's not really a deen. A deen that is just okay with everyone and okay with everything, and it's just it's not really a deen anymore. It's not an ideology. So you have to have islah. Surah Yusuf talks about ethics. It talks about ethical consistency. It talks about the fact that you can't call your ethics variables. They have to be consistent. And without the consistency piece, they're not even ethics anymore. Like you can't call them that. You can call them preferences. You can call them convenient choices, but they're not really ethics. And then in Surah Ar-Ra'd, it talks about the laws. And amongst the most important law that we carry in our deen is the law of haqq. It's the law of righteousness, which is what we've been trying, which is where the whole concept of values and principles and ethics come from. This important law, the law that everything has to be done the right way, or the right thing must be done. And these 4 surahs, they fulfill their own cluster in the Quran, where they take critical points of the 4 domains of faith and they discuss them. So the ayat from 90 to 92 of Surah Yunus, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ فأتبعهم فرعون وجنوده بغيا وعدوا حتى إذا أدركه الغرق قال آمنت أنه لا إله إلا الذي آمنت به بنو إسرائيل وأنا من المسلمين الآن وقد عصيت قبل وكنت من المفسدين فاليوم ننجيك ببدنك لتكون لمن خلفك آية وإن كثيرا من الناس عن آياتنا لغافلون. This epic moment within the story of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. The struggle of Musa and Fir'aun. Musa had, like the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, had a two-phasic struggle. He had the struggle with the pagan enemy, with the one who tried to silence him and kill him. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam struggle in Mecca. And then he had the struggle with his own people, with his followers. Nifaq in his ranks. Disobedience in his ranks, lack of commitment in his ranks, which is what the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with in Medina. So that's why because of these 2 similarities, specifically, Musa is the prophet who is spoken about the most in the Quran, because these 2 pieces were so similar. So the Prophet ﷺ had a prophet before him who kind of walked a similar path to the one that he was walking. So hearing the stories of Musa ﷺ prepared him well for what was going to come later on in his life. There's one thing to fight the external fight. It's one thing to go up against a Fir'aun, who is clearly against your values, who's going against the morality of what your teachings are, who is trying to oppress you and transgress against you. That's one thing. It's another thing to find the struggle coming internally from your own followers, from the people who are supposed to be with you, who are supposed to be like you, your own brothers and sisters, the ones who gave the covenant, gave the testimony that you gave. And you find that you can't make things work with them. That's a whole different type of struggle. And the Prophet ﷺ had both in his life, and we have both in our lives. We tend to magnify the first one. We tend to magnify the struggle of the external forces, when really the main problem are the internal ones. It's the internal ones. We can't organize our household. We can't clean up our own backyard. We can't take care of our own issues, our internal issues. And because we can't, we decide that it's the fault of the external people who are trying to harm us, when really it isn't. And I know that this is something that no one can argue. You can't argue with me on this. I'm sorry. I lived in the Middle East and I lived here. I lived in both, and during very critical times of my life, and during critical times of both parts of the world. And I know how we thought we were living there, performing da'wah and in the ranks of teaching, and how people viewed a government that was totalitarian and oppressive in nature, and how we blamed it for everything. We blamed it for all of our failures. And then when I came here, all of the pieces that I was struggling with there did not exist and we had the exact same failures, maybe even worse. Like we had the exact same failures in nature, the exact same types of failures, no difference. And the stuff that I blamed the Assad regime for, and probably the biggest evil I've ever seen in life is that regime, and I hope to see him in Yawm al-Qiyamah at the worst, in the worst of statuses, Allahumma ameen, inshallah, and people like him. But I blamed him for certain things regarding da'wah, that I felt it was his fault, it was the fault of his regime. Then I came here and those things weren't here, and we had the exact same failures. And I learned, okay, it's really actually not the external piece. It's the internal piece that we tend to... Anyways, this epic moment in the history of humanity, where Allah says, we got Banu Israel through the Bahr, وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ, through the sea. We had them cross the sea. فَأَتْبَعَهُمْ فِرْعَوْنُ وَجُنُودُهُ بَغْيًا وَعَدْوًا. And Fir'aun and his soldiers, they followed him. They followed them, بَغْيًا, with the intention of oppression, وَعَدْوًا, and the intention of transgression. I mean, they were trying to harm, they wanted to kill, they wanted to hurt, they wanted to harm. They wanted to do something that they know was ethically wrong. And of course the sea, as the story is known, would collapse upon Fir'aun and those with him. حَتَّى إِذَا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرَقُ. Just at the moment came when Fir'aun was being caught up by the drowning. The sea was engulfing him, was swallowing him, and he was drowning. Just as he fully drowned, just before he fully drowned and died, he would say, آمنت أنه لا إله إلا الذي آمنت به بنو إسرائيل. I bear witness that there is no God aside from the one that Banu Israel has been talking about and they believe. وأنا من المسلمين, and I have now submitted. So he would be called upon by the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-an, now? That's what this means. Now. You're going to do that now. How many thousand people did you kill? How many hundreds of thousands did you enslave? How many years did we give you? How many chances? How many signals and signs and miracles did we send your way? How much now? Now, just as your soul leaves your body, just as you disconnect from this world, you're going to say that. وَقَدْ عَصَيْتَ قَبْلُ. And you spent all of your life in ma'asiyah, in sin. وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. And you've always been amongst the corrupt and the people who spread corruption. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ. Today, we will save you, but we will save your body only. We're going to save your body, not you. لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. So that you may be a sign for those who come after you. So that people can see you. This is the guy who stood on the mountain and said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He's the one who said, I am your highest ranked Lord. This is the one who declared himself God. This is the one who decided that this group of people were not equal to this group of people and enslaved them. This is the person who controlled the biggest army in the land and had the most power in the land. This is him. Look at him. وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِّنَ النَّاسِ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا لَغَافِلُونَ. Unfortunately, many people, they dismiss Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's signs. They dismiss them. They're indifferent towards these signs. They don't pay attention to them. Fir'aun doomed himself. Fir'aun made his choices in his life. He was offered multiple times by Musa alayhi salam out. He was offered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exits time and time again. But his ego was too big. He was too proud. It's hard sometimes when you commit yourself to something to admit that you were wrong. It's hard. It takes a lot of, it takes rujula. True manhood, in my opinion. It's an ethical thing, but I think it requires that inner strength for you to say, I was wrong. That was all wrong. None of that was right. I don't know why I committed myself to that. That was wrong. Or I do know, and I was wrong at the time, and I admit it. And I'm going to change my ways. That is, if you run into someone who ever does that, then you hold on to that person. That's a good person, and that should be your friend. Because it's such a rare trait amongst human beings. So rare. Fir'aun was offered exits time and time again. He just didn't want to take them. Because he had invested so much of his time and his life into it. It's hard now to get out. We run into this problem everywhere. People struggle with this all the time. I see it all the time. People in their 40s and 50s who are stuck in a position where they have to stick to it. It's been 20 years now. They're not going to change now. They're not going to, they look bad. They're going to lose their credibility. They're not going to be able to, it just doesn't look very good. They don't feel comfortable doing it. And they commit themselves to something they know is wrong. And they justify it. And that's where the human psyche is so amazing. Because the human psyche is so good at lying to yourself, to you. And justifying, no, it's okay. No, it's fine. You're good. You're good. They're the ones who are wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're good. You're excellent. Deep down inside, you know you're full of it. And you know that you should change it. And that what you've committed yourself to is wrong. And you should change your commitment. But you just don't want to do it. So you just tell yourself this narrative. You look for other people who agree with you. Those enablers. Wallahi, those people are going to be in Jahannam before Haman goes in before Fir'aun. Why? Because it's enablers that ruin things. When you're doubting yourself for a moment, when you're wrong and you're doubting yourself, it's the friend who comes and tells you, no, you're good. Don't listen to your self-doubt. You're fine. And then you were close to maybe changing your mind, or at least examining your situation or assessing yourself appropriately, and they just push you forward. When you're on a path of falsehood, when you're doing the wrong thing, don't have friends like that. Have friends who challenge you. Have the annoying friend who will look at what you're doing and say, nah, nah. That's the good friend. Even if sometimes they're a bit over. Sometimes, even if they do it a little bit more than you would like. It's better than this person who just, claps along for you, regardless of what you're doing. Fir'aun committed himself to his lie, because there were enough people telling him, you're good, you're right. He committed himself to his lie, he committed himself to his lie, he committed himself to lie, until he knew that he was going to drown. Khalas, he knew that he couldn't swim his way out. He was going to drown. He took the first gulp of water, he knew the next one was going to kill him. It was going to fill his lungs, he was done. And at that moment, that's how far it took. It had to arrive at that moment for him to finally give up his ego and say, La ilaha illa alladhi amanat bihi banu Israel. Doesn't even know his name. Doesn't even know the name. Yeah, whatever Banu Israel was saying, they're right. Of course, now it's easy. Now, and you've lost everything. You've lost everything, so you'll give up. It's not enough, though. It didn't work for Fir'aun. There are scholars amongst our ummah that think he'll make it, by the way. It's an interesting thing. There are scholars, Muslim scholars, qadiman wa hadithan, who think he'll make it. They said he didn't say no. He said, فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ. He didn't say no. It's obvious that he said no, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that's how they feel about it. They feel that he said, La ilaha illa alladhi. They can't get over it. He said the word. He must make it. I only say it because it's interesting that, subhanAllah, the hearts of the scholars of our ummah are always on the side of people making it. The people, inshallah, even if they were horrific criminals, it's just how they feel about things. But this person doomed himself. He has no one to blame but himself. But think about this. The whole point of his story is that you and I don't fall into the same trap that he fell into. The second ayah is the saddest, in my opinion, the saddest story in the Quran. This is the saddest story. I can't get over it. I've been reading it since I can never get over this story. It's just too painful. Nuh alayhi salam spent, in his years, 950. I don't know how much that is in our years. I don't know. It's probably not the same, but it's a long time. He was burdened with a long time of da'wah, Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. That was his burden. That he was going to spend a long time and get very small, little responses. Like he wasn't going to get a response, the response that he wanted. The response that his da'wah deserved, he didn't get it. Like it was the most exaggerated number of followers was 72. Which is a very small number when you think about it. Basically every 13 years, one guy. So he would wait for someone to be born until he hit puberty and then got da'wah for him. So this is how it was happening. Very few people. All he wanted at the end, and all men want at the end, is their families. The earlier you figure this out, the better, obviously, in life. Because if you wake up to this too late, it may be too late to actually save them. Nuh alayhi salam was not someone who woke up late. No, Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam took all the steps. Took all the appropriate steps to take care of his family. He was a family-oriented man, as all prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are, historically in the Quran. But one of his sons just didn't listen. And the story here tells us what happened. وَهِيَ تَجْرِي بِهِمْ فِي مَوْجٍ كَالْجِبَالِ. And as that ship, as that fulk, is running, it's sailing, with all of the people who are on it, the believers and the animals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had on it. The ark was filled. It's full. Most say it was built like a submarine. So he was only able to poke his head out and see who was there. It wasn't a regular ship. في موج كالجبال. It's sailing amongst waves that are as high as mountains. And Nuh alayhi salam sees his son. The one who didn't get on the ark with him. The one who didn't get on with him. The bleeding heart, the wound, the active wound that exists inside of his heart, that he can't express openly because, what is he going to say? But the open wound in his heart, he sees him. وَنَادَى نُوحٌ ابْنَهُ, and he calls upon his son. وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ, and then they put this word there. وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ, and he was isolated. I don't know if this is referring to how he was at the moment Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam saw him, or whether it was referring to how this young man lived his life. I don't know. I think probably both. Because you could easily go through the verse and not use this term, and the verse still has its full meaning. But he used it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ, and he was isolated. When a person isolates himself from his community, isolates himself from his family, isolates himself from those who care for him. We see this all the time. I see it, it's very painful when I see it. When I see younger teenagers and high school students and university, that they've isolated themselves. They're not a part of their family. Like I can see the father, the mother, the other siblings are all sitting there, and he's doing something different. He's on his own track. He's living his own life. He's not a part of this movement at all. He doesn't belong to this way of thought. He's isolated himself. She's isolated herself. We see it all the time. It's very sad. Wallah, till now, even in the context of this life, it's very sad, wallah, when you see it. Because you feel so bad for this family. You feel bad for the siblings. You feel bad for the parents. You feel bad for the individual too. That they ended up isolated, that we wouldn't have as much of these problems if we had welcoming masajid, by the way. Just as a point, to make here. That if our masajid were a bit more welcoming to the youth, we would have less of these problems. We would still have some of these problems, because if Nuh alayhi salam had it, then we can't really blame or shame people if they end up having that in their family members. But statistically speaking, if we're going to look at our community, I'm pretty sure that if our masajid were a bit more youth-oriented, like if the concept that was being taught in masajid, the philosophy, the culture that was being brought there, was to serve this demographic specifically, was to make sure that they find their space, that they're welcome, that there are people there to take care of them, to bring them in, to speak to them, to help them figure out their facilities that are directed towards them, masajid that are tolerant of their problems. I think if we had more of that, we would have less of these problems. Wallahu a'lam, that's my opinion. You may disagree and say, no, none of that matters. Masajid should be run like churches, and that's how it's supposed to be. And youth can either choose to become with us or not. It's their problem. You can think that way. I don't know. I think that you can probably do a better job with our Muslim youth, and especially in the West. I don't think it makes a difference, honestly, West or East or Middle East. I've seen it doesn't make a difference. I grew up in the Middle East. I used to go to the masjid. What do you think the percentage of shabab who prayed in the masjid was? It was a full Sunni village. Full Sunni village. What do you think it was? No different than it is here. Wallahi, no different than it is here. Jumu'ah, wallahi, no different. If there was a janazah, I remember this as clear as the sun. There would be a janazah, and you would have people praying the janazah out inside, and then you would have 2 times the number standing outside the masjid because they don't pray at all. They don't pray not janazah, they don't pray in general. وَكُلُّهُمْ مُسْلِمٌ sunnah, all of them. Them and their kids, they want to go to the janazah because someone died, but they don't pray. It's really not that different. And you can say, oh, that's just you in Syria. Yeah, Syria. Suburbs of Damascus, right? Where the Umayyads ran things. This is where, this is a very good reflection of what the Muslim Ummah looks like. I can tell you that much. Why? Because masajid don't function that way. Masajid are treated like libraries and churches. And forgive me if I'm saying, maybe I shouldn't say churches because it's not appropriate. But I've been to them and I've seen. These are places that the important is to protect the sanctity of the architecture, keep the voices down, make sure everything is clean. That's not what masajid were. Imagine the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was no bigger than this area that we're in. Imagine at the back over there, instead of the sisters are up front, and the back people are living. People are living. They live there. They live here. Meaning they change their diapers for their kids, and they have their meals, and they sleep, and they're here inside the masjid. That's the masjid of Rasulullah alayhi sallam. You don't like that? You wouldn't have enjoyed being with him alayhi sallam back then, because that's how his masjid functioned. For better or for worse. I'm not saying that we do that, open our masjid for homeless people. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Don't jump to the extreme, but at least make sure it's open for your own. At least make sure it's open for your own kids. SubhanAllah, you see all these individuals who are very harsh with people and their kids because they don't have kids, or their kids are too old, or whatever, or their kids are fine, meaning they're in their older ages. Once a person has a 13-year-old, he changes his mind. He's like, well, where's the masjid that I can send my son, where they're open and they're not too difficult. Yeah, suddenly, subhanAllah, it matters, eh? You see this transition happen time and time again. I don't know when we're going to learn. This story is there. وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ. And he isolated himself. He's accountable for this, the son of Nuh alayhi salam. He doomed himself. The theme. He doomed himself. وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ. He isolated himself. But he broke the heart of his father. And he ended up in there. يَا بُنَيَّ ارْكَبْ مَعَنَا. Oh my son, come join me. Say La ilaha illallah and get on board with me. وَلَا تَكُمْ مَعَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Don't be with the disbelievers. قَالَ سَآوِي إِلَى جَبَلٍ يَعْصِمُنِي مِنَ الْمَاءِ. He said, I'm going to seek refuge in one of the mountains here. The mountain top, so the water doesn't bother me. Don't worry, I'm good. I'm good, Baba. I'm good. وَحَالَ بَيْنَهُمَا الْمَوْجِ. And then a big wave came between them. فَكَانَ مِنَ الْمُغْرَقِينَ. And he drowned. And poor Sayyidina Nuh stood there and saw his son drown. I think it's literal, but I also take this figuratively too. I think you can take a figurative lesson. How many fathers are standing there watching their kids drown? Figuratively, just watching them drown. Watching dunya just sweep them away. Watching the waves of shahawat and shubuhat and all, just drown them, and they're just standing there, they have nothing. They can't do anything for them. They wish they could, yeah, please, they can't. They don't have the tools, they don't have the facilities, what are we doing? What are we doing? Living here as Muslims in the West, what else are we supposed to be doing, really? If we're not going to take care of our kids to make sure, like, we keep on talking about the ummah and sending money back overseas and Gaza. If you don't take care of the people who are here, in 30 years there won't be anyone to send money back. There won't be any Muslims to advocate for the people back with. There'll be nothing left here. If you don't take care of what you have, if you don't take care of the next generation, we're not going to live forever. 30 years from now, we won't be here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us long lives with salihat. But 30 years, I'm probably not going to be around anymore. Especially not to do this. Who is going to do this? Where are they going to come from? What about if we don't have a next generation, then there's not going to be a future to our ummah. If we're not focusing on that, then what exactly are we focusing on? What's the point of living? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? I don't get it. I really don't. I struggle with this. When I speak to people, I'm like, what else is there? Aside from making sure that you educate young Muslims, you empower them, you strengthen their identity, and you give them the ability to go ahead and make a difference in the world. Because our generation was not offered that. And our generation is crippled and handicapped by the years of oppression and political, the political controversy and harm that we have gone through, that we don't have the tools, but our kids will, if we take the time to make sure that they will. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ functioned. He built a foundation of Sahaba that were young, with Zubayr and Talha and Ali and Sa'id and Sa'ad, so that when he passed away, ﷺ, they took on Qadisiyya and Yarmouk, and they're the ones who made sure that you and I are Muslim today. He ﷺ didn't lead those battles, he wasn't around for them. But the children, the kids that were sitting around him that he educated did. The final set of verses of those who doom themselves, what is it? I have no idea what the ayah is. What does it say at the beginning? وَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ رُسُلُنَا لُوطًا سِيءَ بِهِمْ وَضَاقَ بِهِمْ ذَرْعًا وَقَالَ هَذَا يَوْمٌ عَصِيبٌ وَجَاءَهُمْ قَوْمُهُ يُهْرَعُونَ إِلَيْهِ وَمِنْ قَبْلُ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ هَؤُلَاءِ بَنَاتِي هُنَّ أَطْهَرُ لَكُمْ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُخْزُونِي فِي ضَيْفِي أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. The people of Lut is my final example of those who doomed themselves. They made a choice. They made a moral choice, a behavioral choice. They chose to go against the basics of the human fitrah. They chose to change what tahara meant, what cleanliness was. They chose to ruin one of the basic ethics that the human race has carried throughout the centuries. They chose to do that. And Lut alayhi salam tried his best. He tried his best. He gave it his best shot into educating them. Their responses were always إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. These are people that believe in cleanliness. Outdated stuff. It's all about openness and freestyle. Embrace the dirt. Embrace your, all these slogans that we heard in the 70s died off and then came back again now in our times. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the 3 malaika to him in the form of men. They came knocking on the door, asking if they could get to know these people. Maybe they'll join them. New flesh, new blood. Somebody new. for fahisha purposes. They're coming to the house of a prophet, seeing if they can get access to the people inside because they're new. They haven't seen them before. They seem a bit, they seem young and youthful, and their faces are all clean. Maybe وَجَاءَهُ قَوْمُ يُهْرَعُونَ إِلَيْهِ. They're as quickly as they could. وَمِنْ قَبْلُ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. And before this moment, they had been indulging in sayyi'at and behaviors that are. And Lut alayhi salam, what he reminded them of is tahara. Ya qawmi, ha'ula'i banati, the daughters, atharu lakum. Some people think he asked them to go and rape them. No. He said athar. He said athar. Athar as in pure. Go and marry my daughters. My daughters, not my daughters, but all prophets see the women, his daughters. هؤلاء بناتي هن أطهر لكم. The daughters, it's more pure for you. Go back to what it was always supposed to be. Go back to the tahara. Go back to that which is clean. Go back to that which is pure. فاتقوا الله. Have some mindfulness of Allah. ولا تخزوني في ضيفي. Don't embarrass me in front of my. I have guests. Lut didn't know who they were, by the way. Lut alayhi salam received these guests. He didn't know who they were at the time. He would find later that they were the malaika, but as far as he was concerned, 3 men knocked on his door. And he had to open. And when he saw them, he actually got very upset. قَالَ هَذَا يَوْمٌ عَصِيبٌ. He said, this is a horrible day. Right? Why? Because he doesn't want to have a guest? No, because he knows what his people are going to do. Because you know how dirty they've become. He knows how morally, how much they've lost their morals. To what degree they have lost any sense of decency at all. That they're going to come and ask for him. أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. He asked the question. Is there not one sensible person amongst you? Have you completely lost your sensibility? No common sense. No basic decency anymore. That's what Rajul Rashid. Rashid is someone who just has common sense. Which doesn't seem to be as common as we use the term, unfortunately. And no one with common sense here, not to behave this way. There's so many reasons why you shouldn't behave this way. They're my guests, first of all. That's one thing. It's haram. It's disgusting. It goes against none of them. These people doomed themselves too. No one dooms you in life. You choose. You choose whether you take the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try your best and walk down that. Or you choose to doom yourself. ما كان الله ليظلمهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never oppress people. ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون. People oppress themselves. And whenever you see someone in the Quran who was punished, we know what happened after this. فجعلنا عاليها سافلها وأمطرنا عليها حجارة من سجيل منضود مسومة عند ربك وما هي من الظالمين ببعيد. They were destroyed. When you see that in the Quran, you know that this is something they brought upon themselves, not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inflicted upon them unfairly. I'll end with that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاك الله خيرا.